Hello and welcome to Crafting with Madam K. So tonight we're going to dye our leather using a new leather technique that blotches the dye on to give a cool antiqued finish. Yes, I know that was really cheesy, but hey, it's Saturday night. I am safely at home quarantined, enjoying a couple vodka punches. So let's have some fun and learn a new technique. So we're going to look at two different techniques that I haven't tried yet. The first one is using Neatsfoot oil compound to condition the leather first before putting the dye in, and the goal here is that the dye will soak in more consistently and evenly, giving you a lighter color with each coat. The second technique is using the blotching technique, which is actually going to involve rolling up a piece of linen or cotton and dabbing the dye on in blotches like sponge painting almost. And when those keep overlapping and blending together, it's going to give it a intentionally discolored look for a cool antique finish. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to turn out really cool. And what I'm making is a box or a case to hold tarot cards. So I think that it should have a really cool antique brass finish that'll be perfect for any tarot set. So let's go ahead and start with step number one, which is adding the Neatsfoot oil compound. So I have not ever used this yet. Maybe I did because I opened it, but I don't remember. So I've never tried this technique. So it does say that you want to use the Neatsfoot oil apply with a cloth, and you actually want the leather to be damp, not wet, but damp. So that's good. I didn't read that, so I wouldn't have expected that you'd want to wet the leather before adding a conditioner. So since we just want it to be damp, I'm going to use my mister here. Mister. That one's for you, Leanna. Okay, so the leather is damp. It's not that wet because you can't see the water coming through the other side. If you can see the water soaking through to the other side, you definitely over wet it, and you'll want to let it sit for a minute before you go to the next step. I also have a belt loop here that I'm going to attach, so I'm going to dye that at the same time. Okay, so I have just a piece of t-shirt scraps. These are actually really cool. You can get them on Amazon by like the pound, like 5 pounds of t-shirt scraps, and they're pretty decent t-shirts, so they're great for applying dye to leather or buffing the conditioner on the leather. I use them a lot for that. I assume we don't want to oversaturate it with the Neatsfoot oil, so just try to give it a nice layer, apply it a little bit at a time, and use circular motions. Okay, so you can see where there's more oil in the leather, it's going to be darker. I think that if I was trying to get a smooth color out of my finished product, I would be a little more careful about putting the oil on in case it's going to form any sort of resist that might cause it to end up lighter in other spots where there's more oil. But with this one, because I'm doing an intentionally blotchy design, I think that if that does happen, it will actually cause it to look a little nicer. And no, ignore that. I don't even know what I was going to say there. What we're going to do next is let this sit for the recommended period of time. So with this, it says to let sit overnight. And with most steps, you want to let it dry completely, because if you're putting on multiple layers of dye or multiple layers of anything, if it has any moisture in it, it's going to mix with it, and it could cause a different reaction and a different color that's unexpected. So I'm impatient and I really want to see how this turns out, so I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to, I don't know, wait like 10-15 minutes. I'll start to see when the color starts to lighten up a little bit. The leather's always going to start to return back to its normal color as it dries. I might even go ahead and apply some heat to try to dry it out so I can get to that quicker. Again, not necessarily the recommended step, but because again I'm going with that intentionally blotchy, antiqued, messed up look, I think that skipping these steps and seeing how to cause those accidents intentionally will help avoid them in the future. So while that's drying, let's just go ahead and get the rag for dyeing the leather ready. So again, I got my piece of t-shirt scrap, and I'm going to just cut a good size strip. I would say maybe, and again, I've never done this, so let's just do like 4 inches by roughly 8 inches. I don't know, just enough so we can fold it a couple times and roll it up. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. So I have this piece, and I'm going to just go ahead and fold it in half to get me the folded edge, and that's the edge that I'm going to use for dyeing. I don't know why, it just seems like that makes more sense, so that's what I'm going to do. Again, I just learn by doing and see what happens. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold it up. I'm going to fold it in half, and then going from the folded edge, roll it probably pretty tightly. I think the key with this, though, is just to make sure that when you have it all rolled up, this is pretty level, or maybe just smash it down, because that's what we're going to use to blotch the dye on. And then if you have a rubber band, I'd recommend securing it with rubber band, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit it with some duct tape. And then once this is dried out enough, we'll be ready to see how the mahogany dye looks on this. So go grab yourself a drink. See you in 15. I let it sit probably for about an hour or 2. I don't remember how long I was gone. But I'm going to go ahead and continue on to the next step anyways, because like I said, I'm impatient. So I'm going to take the leather mahogany dye and pour it into the cap, because I'm going to need something to dip the linen roll into. And I was thinking about this, because I have such a tightly rolled spiral, it might actually show a spiral in the dye, so I'm not sure how that's going to turn out. So that's going to be an interesting experiment. That might be one reason why some people might use the other side, because it might give more, like I said, a sponge technique. So I don't know. Again, let's just dive in, and worst case scenario, I can just even it out by putting mahogany dye over the whole thing. So I'm just going to start from the outside. Oh, it does actually do a spiral. So, okay, so here's one of those accidents I keep talking about. Like, that's really cool. I would love to repeat that. I think I am just going to do that over and over again on the whole thing. I really like how that looks. See, this is why I do the experiments. If I followed the instructions specifically, I wouldn't have gotten this design. But now we have this really cool marble design. This is not what I expected at all. I expected something that was going to look a lot more like an antiqued design, so I might still do another video on that using a different method for rolling the fabric. But the way that we rolled the fabric on the crease and then folded it in half and spiraled it from the inside out gave us this really cool spiral design that we can just blotch over and over to get that cool design. And then when I put the top coat on it, it's going to darken the entire leather a little bit more to let that blend in, so it's more of a repeating pattern in the leather and not an accent design on its own. So I think overall that was a pretty successful experiment here. I think the Neatsfoot oil probably helped a lot to get the dye to stay consistent, and I think that sponge dyeing technique formed a really unique pattern to make a piece that really can't be replicated very easily. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, it may not be the right way, but it's the Madam K way.